Today, in the framework of this Moscow Financial Forum organized by the Ministry of Finance, Russia, and the government of the Moscow region, we'll have several breakout sessions to our great pleasure for those who are working on this issue. In the framework of this forum, we have a very interesting site where we are taking place right now. Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand. Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand. Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand.
Некоммерческих организаций. Тема сегодня, как говорят, в тренде. Одна из очень актуальных и востребованных тем. За последнее время прошло огромное количество форумов, пресс-конференций, конференций, дискуссий по этим вопросам. Тем не менее, есть еще очень много проблем, и мы, еще раз хочу подчеркнуть, очень рады, что организаторы форума эту тему не только не забыли, но поставили вот в такой повестке. Поэтому сегодня мне доверено, и для меня это большая честь, быть модератором этой панельной дискуссии. Зовут меня Галина Николаевна, фамилия Карелова, я зампред Совета Федерации. И этой темой занимаюсь практически, не знаю сколько, мне кажется, работаем в социальной сфере. Тема гражданского общества, взаимодействия власти с негосударственными организациями всегда была в повестке дня. Но за последнее время она вышла в топ проблем, и благодаря, в первую очередь, поддержке этой темы и развитию этой темы президентом Российской Федерации Владимиром Владимировичем Путиным. Еще в декабре 2015 года Владимир Владимирович в своем послании Федеральному собранию 3 декабря обозначил особую миссию некоммерческих, социально ориентированных организаций. И это обусловлено двумя факторами или двумя причинами. Во-первых, вырос авторитет и есть востребованность самих социально ориентированных некоммерческих организаций принимать более активное участие во всех сферах жизни общества. Более того, Общественная палата, и у нас представитель Общественной палаты, здесь есть я, представлю чуть-чуть позднее, выступила с предложением рассмотреть возможность участия социально ориентированных НКО в оказании социальных услуг. Была создана большая экспертная группа, я тоже принимала в ней участие, и в итоге появился соответствующий закон о статусе некоммерческих организаций, которые работают с высокой эффективностью, не имеют каких-либо замечаний, прежде всего финансовых, они могут претендовать на статус исполнителя общественно полезных услуг. И в этой связи уже закон, когда был принята целая вереница нормативных актов, прежде всего на федеральном уровне, и соответствующее постановление правительства и дорожная карта доступа социально ориентированных НКО к оказанию социальных услуг. И в регионах мы не имеем на сегодняшний день данных, но на день проведения второго форума социальных инноваций мы имели полную картину, потому что провели мониторинг регионального законодательства.
Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand. Please raise your hand. Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand. Please raise your hand. Он сейчас придет, естественно, разгоряченный, ты подготовь слова.
Нормативную базу и региональное законодательство по этой теме. 56 регионов имеют свои программы. Это хорошие, добротные программы, которые можно изучать и использовать другим регионам. То есть у нас сегодня есть практически все в нормативном отношении, или почти все. Я думаю, что сегодня мы попытаемся проанализировать еще раз, насколько...
Вы знаете, как делаем? Вот так вот. Is anyone listening to the interpreter? Please raise your hand. Ни одна рука не поднимается. А он не идет, вы понимаете, в зале никто не слушает перевод на английский, нет людей.
У нас онлайн-трансляция идет на английском языке. Включайтесь.
Well, they voiced it at the second forum of social innovations. I think we will discuss these issues. Nonetheless, we believe that today there will be a fresh look at this issue and the search for the reasons why this process goes so hard, and the look by financial analysis and support of this issue. And in this regard, I would like to remind you that as for the financial forum, we discussed the day of financier. So prior to our discussion, I would like to...
Финансистами. Это огромная армия в стране, это высокопрофессиональные люди. Я сама получала экономическое образование. Для меня самое сложное – это были предметы, связанные с финансами. Поэтому мы понимаем, насколько это сложно, и поздравляем всех с Днем финансиста. Я представить хочу наших сегодня спикеров, но перед тем, как мы начнем работу, у меня еще есть просьба от Минфина. Ее выполнит, и я представляю сегодня одного из спикеров, Лаврова Алексея Михайловича, заместителя министра финансов Российской Федерации. Хочу еще раз, Алексей Михайлович, вас поздравить в вашем лице, всю вашу команду Минфина и всех финансистов регионов. И если не обидятся на меня остальные спикеры, я бы сразу предоставила слово Алексею Михайловичу, потому что он должен выполнить очень приятную миссию в связи с Днем финансиста. Алексей Михайлович, вам слово. Пожалуйста, трибуна.
В номинации Московского финансового форума «Обеспечение допуска негосударственных организаций к оказанию государственных муниципальных услуг в социальной сфере» диплом Московского финансового форума вручается Ярославской области. Диплом.
The diploma is being received by the Vice Chair of the Yaroslav Region Government, Ilya Balanin. Resulting from the competition of best professions, best young financier of the regions of Russia. This competition was held by a financier community. This diploma is being given to a consultant to the growing budget income of the Ministry of Finance of Ulyanovsk region, Dalia Gisamadinova. The same nomination, the best young financier of the municipalities. The certificate goes to the chief specialist of the Financial Department Control the Omsk city, Oksana Nikolaeva. On behalf of the organizer of the forum, Ministry of Finance, and the mayorate of Moscow, on behalf of all of us, we would like to congratulate the winners of the second Moscow Financial Forum competition. Dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to say we should align ourselves and congratulate. It's also a big event for us when, in the framework of the Financial Forum, those receive awards who work quite proactively, including NGOs, in social services provision. It's an icon event. It's important that we raise this issue of our interface with the Ministry of Finance, because mostly the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Social Services, and the Ministry of Economic Development work intensively in this area. And this role of Ministry of Finance, we are informed a lot less about it. So these are quite big events for us. I continue to introduce the participants of the discussion. Lyubov Dukhanina, Deputy of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian government, Russian Federation of the 7th Convention. Lyubov is quite proactive in these areas. Furthermore, she has passed a long way in laying the basis for NGO development. So she's quite knowledgeable, not just by ear. Alexandra Kunchevskaya, she's from the Tyumen region, Western Siberia. This region is one of the best in this field. So they were suggested to speak on their behalf at the second Forum of Social Innovations, and the governor made a brilliant presentation and offered a very interesting experience with Tyumen region in this field. Hopefully, you'll share it with us today. Alexei Sidnev, CEO of Senior Group LLP, chair of the NGO partnership, facilitating the aged people living. He is also involved in establishing the NGO sector in a very serious field, that is social services, community services, including inpatient care facilities, the so-called boarding houses, or tertiary care homes. Few people, in fact, are willing to go in this area for work. And Alexei, well, I'd like to mention all of those there. And drawing the bottom line, we always mention his team, Elena Tupoleva, Saldunova. She's high professional in this area. Elena represented the public chamber at that time and currently. The so-called public chamber's order for a more proactive inclusion of NGOs in social services provision. Therefore, Elena's input in developing the legal framework is very impressive. She is now CEO of an autonomous NGO, the Social Information Agency, and I'd like to reiterate she is a member of the Federal Public Chamber. We're also very happy that we see here among all expertise Lev Jakobson. This person is widely known not only in our domain. He is involved quite significantly in monitoring the NGOs. Therefore, his viewpoint is also important, and the information in this area. Lev is the first Vice Chancellor of the National Research Institute, the High School of Economics. This way, dear colleagues, I have introduced now the experts, professionals who have worked in this area for many years. They own their own viewpoint, their standpoint, and I believe that will hold our discussion quite productively. Nonetheless, although we have invited experts and they had prepared on certain issues, and we hope that also you, we are pressed for time, we have only 1.5 hours, but at least, well, in the mode of fast inclusion, you'll be able either make your proposals or remarks. Therefore, dear colleagues, we are launching our discussion. I have made a short introduction. Now I'd like to bring up some examples or numbers to go over to our debate and viewpoint deliveries. I have looked for long, most recent updated data on how many NGOs have come at least among the social services providers, and I found such numbers that as of June the 1st, 2017, we had more than 1,000, or more accurately, 1,047 NGOs who participate in social services provision. They are the ones who are being financed by the federal budget, federal and regional budgets, or municipal budgets, including 705 NGOs. I admit there are more recent numbers, more recent data, and will be grateful indeed if we hear these numbers today. But statistics is always behind the timeline. It needs improvement, more prompt data delivery, so that when we do the budgeting, we would be able to reflect at least also in the data analysis also the budgetary numbers, accounting opportunities of the NGOs. Now, I would like to appeal to Elena Topoleva-Soldunova regarding that. Elena, you know already what the legal framework is. You were at the very source, at the very root of legal framework development. Well, a legal framework, organizational, technical, NGO support, other NGO support measures that have been recognized as fairly effective. And what should be the direction we should move to in order to establish sustainable stimuli for NGO promotion? So please take the microphone. Thank you, Galina. Dear colleagues, I'm also quite happy that this particular subject matter is voiced not only at various forums, not only economic but financial forums, and we discuss indeed such a highly important aspect for all NGOs, not only not-for-profit agencies as well. And to reply to Galina's question, I would say, I would confirm that the legal framework as a whole, the legislation, has been put in shape by now in order to allow the NGOs to go out to the social services marketplace. Well, but it's absolutely unevenly distributed in various parts. Overall, as for facilitating NGO going primarily to the social services marketplace, I would mention the two fundamental documents. That is, a set of the measures to ensure such NGOs access to the marketplace, and also to financing from the federal budget, and the roadmap of not only NGOs, but the entire private sector. And in principle, I believe such basic things have been secured, although we may not say that there is no obstacle in the way anymore, or part of these obstacles may be lifted by some other tools. I mean, the legitimate, the legal tools. As for a narrower, a subcomponent of this area, that is what Galina mentioned as receipt of a new status, that is a publicly useful services provider, although the respective legal framework has been established for that. It's quite extensive, and the respective reports have been submitted to the President, because indeed it was established as he ordered. But now it certainly needs further improvement, because there is a very slow process of the NGOs receiving this legal status as social services provider, because an NGO is supposed to receive a certificate for the proper quality of its service, otherwise it is not included in the respective register. So it looks this NGO can obtain it only from the federal executive agencies. You understand that a minor regional organization to provide adequate evidence to the federal agency that it's the quality of its service is quite adequate, it's very hard. By now, the State Duma has received a bill on such authority for the service quality certificate provision will be raised to the federal level. It will be a stride forward for the publicly useful services provider, but it's inadequate as well, because the second thing that's required to move all this thing forward is at the legal level. That is to draft administrative regulations for the federal and regional executive bodies for this regarding the services they are supposed to provide right now. To issue such service quality certificates, because now it's all disintegrated. Everybody applies for various documents for NGOs, and there is no full list of the respective documents required. No agency has it. The NGOs are unaware what finally is supposed, after all, they're supposed to submit. For such administrative regulations, we believe also should be adopted. And there are some minor things I will not mention. So I'd like to reiterate, as for the publicly helpful services provider status, the current legal framework needs serious improvement. Well, the process is underway. A new presidential order has emerged, a presidential decree, after the meeting in Petrozavodsk with socially focused NGOs last August, and it concerns this legal framework improvement. As for the wider subject matter, going to the social services marketplace, I will just trace out here the remaining issues. Part of those can be resolved, also improving the current legislation. That is primarily the economically unreasonable subsidies and compensations. We always mention that the NGOs file complaints. They say it's very hard for them to work for post-payment, post-service provision payment, because they don't have a mechanism or an arrangement for advance provision, and also nor they have funds for refunding. They cannot get loans from microfinancing organizations. And now, as for the financial agenda of this issue, the NGOs are deprived of the right to use the financial tools, allowing them receive the loans. We include all of it in our forum's resolutions, but unfortunately this issue is still pending. The second important matter, well, as for this subject matter, I also know that we have debating it for long. How do you envision it? At which level we should regulate it? By the government, by regulations to be adopted in the regions. I think we don't need any legislative effort here. It would be just sufficient to make amends to the current some decrees or resolutions by government, federal, also both federal and regionally, as bylaws. So I'm not confident. We need some legislative effort here. Well, let us think over. It's a question to our experts and to the audience. Indeed, there is this obstacle. Yes, Elena, thank you that you have designated it. So we need at least sooner or later to agree. As you say, there are no regulations. If we don't agree how we should progress, then it will be just a recommendation. Also, what I wanted to mention, well, some other pending issues overall in this area, that is the uneven advancement in providing access to social services provisions to the NGOs in various social services field. Originally, these conditions were uneven. For instance, in community services, the share on the NGOs was tending to zero. When we launched all this story, so to say. And now when we have mentioned these quite impressive numbers, there is some progress at least. Something is taking place. My colleagues will tell you more about healthcare and education. There are some areas where this process is in dire straits. Even the federal ministries are hard to put to that, primarily in culture and sport. We see there is serious resistance by federal executive agencies and their unwillingness to accept these processes. Also, there is an obstacle, with the NGOs, they are the NGOs, after all, per se, that they try to seize the niches in the marketplace where the government doesn't work. Sometimes they provide the services the government has not been providing, and they are sort of innovative. They are sometimes just testing a service. As a result, we see that they drop out from the process, because their services are not part of any formal list of those. There is no standard for them. They cannot get in the process. And secondly, they don't have access to the relevant premises to provide inpatient care, primarily to business. Alexei will tell you more about that. And there are some other issues on the list. All I would say is that the Ministry of Finance has drafted a bill on the federal, regional, and municipal order for services. I think the responsibility is given at least to some of these challenges, and they will be lifted. Well, to answer your question, Galina, I would say we hope indeed for this new legislative tool that will help to lift part of the barriers in our way. In ensuring access for NGOs to the social services marketplace. Thank you, Elena. I would ask those who represent the regions, please take another look at the roadmap and all the documents on hand, or even we should initiate also at the Federal Council to gather all the regulations and bylaws, all legislative acts. It seems that by far not all the NGOs boast what's formal adopted. And it's always interesting, whenever you raise an issue, we would be able to refer to this set of documents. And the bills that are currently being being considered by the State Duma, we should probably raise the regions of the country to the level of those who make decisions whether award to the NGOs who work impeccably the status of an NGO as the publicly useful services provider, At that time, when we were holding the second forum of social innovations, only two institutions had received this legal status, and this was made known by the Ministry of Justice. Well, with this pace of progress, we'll never implement finally completely the federal decrees, a presidential decree, or government resolutions. This is the barrier which will certainly will have to surmount, and well, it will affect significantly the intensifying of this issue. I'd like to ask Mr. Jakobson, well, I know that I have already said some words and mentioned that you chair or lead the Center of NGO performance monitoring. And resulting from your studies, what can you say? How the NGOs are prepared? What are the obstacles in their way? Whether all it coincides with what Yelena said, or there are probably some other issues we need to take into account. Thank you indeed, Galina, for this opportunity to speak here. Well, firstly, I would say that our performance, our interface with the NGOs, and we have lots of them on hand, confirms what you have just mentioned. Oftentimes, the NGOs lack information support. And we often forget about that when we speak about financial organizational support. The NGOs sometimes are unaware of the opportunities and the limitations that have been imposed on them. Well, a lot has been reached there, achieved, and we should inform them. We need an ongoing information support for them. Indeed, I will try to be quite brief to answer the question about the availability of the NGOs, relying on some data. Well, the monitoring has lasted for 10 years. You cannot tell too many things at once, but I would rather bring up some data, most recent data of the recent survey of the NGOs, but they are so most varied, and it's not possible to give an exhaustive answer.
2017, but before we get to this data, I want to specify a certain context of it. Actually, well known to the present, but I need to mention it. The subject of involvement of NGO and to provision of social services overall, financed by the state, this topic is political, precisely. And I mean not only that it is call attention of the government of the country, but there are a few topics that 3 times of the messages of the president was mentioned, 3 times in a row. Excluding some international and military things. Basically, topics like this, specific and very non-existent anymore. And but I mean something else. Political problem means is a problem of searching of new balance of interests, sometimes coinciding, sometimes not. And when we speak about involvement of NGO into provision of services, we are not looking. We are looking for new balance of interests between the state in this area, between those organizations themselves and the population, of course. And this issue set in President's messages is from population, from citizens. How does it sound? These services should be provided as the state supports, and those would receive who make it better and cheaper. And this is the interest of the population, but the interest of specific state agency reflects this position sometimes and sometimes not. And the same we can mention about NGO. Like the Minister of Finance that we cooperate together, I mean Higher School of Economics. More important for them, make it cheaper. For industrial ministries is important to be better, but at the same time you need to take care about the network. And this is also characteristic of the regions. And yeah, we need to make it better for the population, and we really want it. but so that their own network does not suffer, and so that we don't fire people, and also to ensure increase in salary. What if the money flows into non-government area? It will be more difficult to. And there are NGOs themselves that really want. What do they want? Well, NGO, like good NGO, not all NGOs are good, as monitoring say, but good one are enthusiasts. They want something that they are involved and make it better and more. They have their own interests, but these interests don't always match, and the problems arise that Elena was mentioned. And now let's see about the readiness, and the question was of Galina to me. And I would like to explain why I started speaking about context, because the readiness to implement different interests are not the same. We start with the thing that many NCO either don't care about taking part of provision of services at the expense of the state. It doesn't mean they don't care about interests of the citizens, but for some reason they don't want to provide these services at the expense of the state. Either they have a donor, very powerful, or their own stuff. Also, many NCOs that are not considering themselves ready for this activity, but most of part of our NCOs are small organizations and quite weak. Yeah, Galina is looking at the watch. I'll expedite. And they're quite weak, and on our issues, about half of NCOs, in principle, considering the prospect of being included in the register that Elena mentioned. And what does it mean? The prospect of entering these waters, like provision of these services needed by the state and the citizens, and engage in state money, is half. And the second half is not ready in principle. Now, more specifically about this readiness, the topic that Elena already mentioned, and with whatever NCO speak about, it's very urgent. That's shortage of financial resources and impossibility to use borrowed funds. And roughly it is referred to by the half of those NCOs who would have been in principle interested to work in this area. And lack of good specialists is 1/4. So they're quite self-critical. And the same mention unavailability of borrowed funds. And others don't even think that loans can be used. But it is needed. So many references to unclear and changing legislation. Legislation is developing in a positive way, that has already been mentioned, but again, let's remember that usually these are small organizations and weak, they don't have their staff lawyers, and figuring out in this legislation is difficult for them, and especially in limitations. And they are afraid state money, somebody may come and ask some questions and they don't know how to answer. And I mention it because there are problems that can be resolved without raising significant funds. And these organizations need assistance, they need to be taught, and good portals and information base should be provided, and that's not expensive. So that's this readiness that we are talking about. We can improve whatever is can do by large corporation is and what NCOs are not able to do. Now, what are they ready specifically? So not to complicate and take a lot of time, the point is that, and it was mentioned by Elaine also, we always are in communication, and these are central problems. NCOs, they see their advantages because they can do something quite differently, like something special. Like if you don't want to do something special, why should you create NCOs? So this specific things does not find support. There are no formats like this. Although it is needed by the citizens, I need to start with the interests of the citizens. And it is needed by the state because satisfaction of citizens depends on innovative approaches. And about comparative advantages, when we ask them, they say about these specific things. And when we're talking about standard services, they also have advantages, possibility of raising donors' money, volunteers, and some things can be done cheaper because of that. So to summarize it, I can tell you that while preparing some changes to legislation and management, and governance, and probably we need to bring up this, raise this level of readiness that Galina mentioned. Only 2 organizations received the status. Now I would say that according to some rumors, there are a couple of dozens, and in order to improve this readiness, what needs to be done? First of all, the easiest thing, and I repeat it, like, to see in these organizations what they are. They are enthusiasts, but not very much experienced, not large, unable to as some staff lawyers, but it's all state goal because people are not satisfied with the social sphere and something needs to be done, and there is a powerful resource here. Well, let's support it with infrastructure, infrastructure first of all, and at the same time let's support what themselves are ready to do, like look of formats and of financing, something standard and standards of changes, and those changes in the area of NCO being implemented in the interest of the whole society. Thank you very much. Very interesting issues, and it's good that you emphasize that due to including NCOs in social sphere, the balance of interest changes. It's always painful, and first of all, for the citizens, they are used to get service from certain organization, and like senior citizens, they already know how it is done, and suddenly something changes, and yeah, that's one of the difficult topics. And being a chairman of the social council of the social protection in Moscow region, we have worked together with the social protection of the Moscow region, made a video for citizens telling what NCOs are doing and showing positive experience, and then citizens' attitude changes because many people just afraid what kind of NCOs are there, and then we need to do a lot about information of citizens and NCOs and budget people, and not only for information support, but improving competency. That's one of the topics that Lev Ilyich not dwelled in details, but since he's working on this area, I think there are some programs that allow NCOs to learn including yourself. And in this regard, I have met Svetlana Chupsheva, and they are preparing a number of training programs, and they should go to the regions. And so thanks for raising these issues. These are very pertinent, so including these NCOs in the area that's improving availability and quality of social services for citizens to be more satisfied in development of social area and provision of social services and receiving social services. Then I would like to ask Olga Nichevsky. I already introduced. She represents two main regions. So how is it in Tumen? What difficulties you encounter, and what you can share with the know-how? And please, for those speakers, 5 minutes, 6 to 5 minutes. So thanks, Galina. In order to be on 5 minutes, I'll try to stick to my presentation because we have seriously prepared for this. So first of all, what I want to say that the first thing the issues of socially oriented, non-commercial, and authorized is a Department of Social Development. And this is not economics, finance, it's social development. And I think it is right because it is practice. And we work with these organizations on the one hand and with potential clients on the other hand. So here this trend is quite with the results. Whatever Elena was talking about and Lev Village, in terms of regulatory base, and actually it's been created in full scale, and moreover, the whole infrastructure that should be at the level of the Tumen government, and it is operational. It is in full mode of discussion with citizens, and we encourage it and develop it, and we have a good number of resourceful centers, and we are always participants of all workshops, seminars, and schools and trainings held by the Ministry of Economic Development in any mode, and webinars. So in this sense, right, the government is interested for the topic to be effective, and we want to say this year we opened a resource center for social entrepreneurs. Because NCOs in the future, social entrepreneurship, whatever we talk about it, and we'll come to that anyway. So we'll prepare not only NCO, but those entrepreneurs that even in the conditions of the draft law on social entrepreneurship and introducing amendments and social entrepreneurship are ready to consider and take part in this work. So we have started this work. So we are fully financially supporting work of resource centers and the list of social services, and developed all the tariffs and standards. We have grant support. And this work has been done. What I want to say about problem issues. First, I understand that no know-how in this area been enough already. We need to move along this path and try to change those, correct those mistakes. So first, what I want to say, weak market, and I support Lev and whatever is this NPO market? What is this? I think it is weak. Even those numbers that you mentioned, 1,047, is a lot. But that's not enough. okay, 40 organizations that show their desire to take part in this process, but it's not the fact that they will. And with those conditions mentioned at the federal level and the social order or whatever, other issues of federal level, those lists, whenever they see it, and when they come to tenders for social, as it is described in the law on social state order, and they will do whatever they used to, because they will not be able to take part, although they will not have a desire. In any case, supporting state agencies to deal with this, they cannot avoid it, and the issue will be that we'll have to provide it, we'll have to support it, and the question is which way and how we do it, whether it's legal or not, and how it should be developed. And so first we need to think at the federal level and federal legislation. That's why we show desire and responded with on a proposition on Ministry of Finance to become a pilot the problem of so first results up to 10% will be made in 2018. So the draft law becomes effective when all financial mechanism in 2019, 1st of January. So how it is, how we can find this balance of interests, and who will make this indicator that the entities and the governance will be evaluated. And that's a serious topic I'd like to for us to think over. Today, the order of transfer and the scope of all these rules and issues to the Ministry of Economic Development, telling us second year that they will prepare and accept this methodology of calculation. So those entities present here, because they are involved in this, and they know everyone thinks their own way. All right. Well, they consider 10%. I mean, well, everyone thinks their own way. And who will evaluate and by the entity and how they will compilate this percentage? Some say that we'll provide 20%, others about for 40%. So for me, since I'm for a social budget, I'm responsible for that. And for our clients, our citizens, and they should not care about those normative documents. They should feel better. So our task, not to get into this, our clients and those citizens that we plan to work together, but methodology was not existing, and sometime it will come up. Other issue are professional standards adopted for social organizations. I mean, what should be a social employee and all those people, professional people involved in provision of services to population. Whether it will cover socially oriented, non-commercial, non-governmental organization. What Lev Ilyich was speaking. What about like headcount, staff lists? When we include it in this sphere, they will stop being NGOs. They will be government institutions, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Development. They are paying serious attention to professional standards, and when we set conditions for NGOs that social employees should have special education and experience, and that's going to be another barrier for NGOs that in principles will not go into this area. It will be a hassle for them. And the last thing I wanted to mention, that Now, in normative documents, regulatory, I don't know whether colleagues support, there are many references on mandatory federal regulatory documents. First, the template of form of state order should be approved at federal level, and of some order only federal. Those methodology only federal level, and the list of social services adopted that not included sport and culture, not so much, and also announced final, and the entity doesn't have the right to make any changes. And so I think that's a problem, a serious issue, but we should not focus on this regulatory issues on federal level. And if we work inside the entity of and if the entity is provides certain budget funds from the budget, and we need to trust and provide some luft for decision making, and we make it faster and better quality, and the models will be developed. Each entity in some time will develop their own model that could be applied, used without any cataclysm for those who want to use it. And so I think that those things, we are ready to take part in all these areas of activities. But so let's do it jointly. So thanks, Olga, so that you don't paint a better picture. Like usual, there are serious issues, and partially would be responded by Alexei. But now I'd like to give the floor to Alexei Sidnev, who's been working in this area for a long and represent non-government, non-profit partnership and entering of business in social area is a large event, and in provision of social. So, Alexei, I know that you consider it very good to working of NGOs, and even better than they work better than state organizations. So, did your position change, and a few words about difficulties that you encounter? So, please, 5 minutes. Well, dear colleagues, if 10 years ago I said that definitely NGO sector operates with better quality than state sector, now I cannot tell this, and I will not do it, because there are some areas where non-government sector operates better, and areas where government sector is leading. And it's excellent because it should be that way. It should be a normal competition between different forms of ownership. If we look at entrepreneurship in social area, and so who is social entrepreneur? They resolve some problem that the state and the society is not able to resolve at this time. So if we look at this area where I'm a specialist, like stationary care of senior citizens, and I would give you statistics that state stationary hospitals are 260,000, and non-governmental places at the end of the year would be about 20,000. So this is significant amounts, and out of this 20,000, if you ask how many in the register, out of 20,000 places, about 5,000 for the whole country out of newly created, and decided to enter into register. So 15,000 available are not included in the register. They are also socially oriented organizations. Why they are not included? For some reasons. Well, it is difficult. The region creates barriers. The tariffs not reflecting economic essence. But the thing is that we see 1 year ago there were 12,000 organizations like this. 2 years ago, 7,000. So every year, number of increasing 30-40%. So why should we help them to increase, and they already doing it. So our task is not to increase the number of these institutions, but to develop the environment where the emerging organizations would work according to certain standards. So tragedy that happened in Krasnoyarsk recently showed imperfections of the system, that entering is voluntarily things, and when we were asked, and they said that they were not being aware of this even. So yeah, there are some standards needed, and speaking about this, everybody needs to be taught how the staff list, but nobody will do it. So this has been historic, but nobody cares about it so we need to speak about standards, and what standards need to be and applied for all organizations. So the business is profitable in this area. It is profitable in two cases. So first, if we don't comply to the law, and second, if you comply to the law, but when it is profitable but long-term. So it's not an oil business. You cannot make fast money here. Require investment and structure and the process. And so what we see is NGOs are not able to do the independence. So I agree with Lev. NGOs are different. They don't have the ability to raise money and good specialists. So if you help NGOs, it's important for us to provide this assistance. But what happened is when the president 2 years ago said that need to give 10% of social cost to NGOs. So what business has done, and of course we organize NGOs, and because entities say if you're not NGO, we're not going to give you an order. So actually, it was unreal. So those NGOs are not NGOs. There's some layer between business. Okay, not everywhere. Yeah, not everywhere. We are aware of this. But really, in Petrozavodsk, it was possible to, and the president confirmed that 10% are not NGOs, are non-governmental organizations. And it's important that it depends how you calculate it. And if commercial organization provide services quality, and the question is, why don't you provide this state order to them? So the problems exist and are less than earlier, and a lot has been done. So thanks to the Ministry of Finance for tax benefits and tax for profit tax and VAT, but these benefits expire in a couple of years. So what other issues are there? Problems of regional tariffs. Tariffs are calculated, how much money was spent. And there are no methods of calculating tariffs, and this method need to be developed and unified. This means two things. Expenses of entities, of subjects will increase in this area, and including those people already receiving social services, but also new people will emerge, like in Volgograd. And for the last couple of months, they try to find out what real number of people need social support.
Alexei, you're always interesting in your deliveries, but unfortunately we are pressed for time. In Volgograd, there are 3 times more people who need help, and they found through the post of Russia all those required. So it's a financial forum. Then we should speak about efficient spending, but now we are being financed at a residual basis. So in order to resolve the issue about ensuring access and proper financing, I think we will convene more and more here and rejoice at our success. I apologize that I have to limit the timing. All the presentations of our experts are interesting, and we would like them to have them more complete. But the format of today's discussion is, as I said, Alexei has noted that there are less problems, less obstacles, and it's great. But they certainly rise from time to time. New challenges will lead to other obstacles, and we need to respond to them more promptly. Thank you that you raised the issue about tariff setting. This should be on the agenda always. So now it's quite relevant here. So I think Alexei will also offer his viewpoint on that. I'm also pleased, dear colleagues, in giving the floor to Lyubov Dukhanina. Lyubov has worked a lot to establish an NGO, or rather a private school. She has also her standpoint, what should be done, not to interfere with such processes. Lyubov, you will. Dear Galina, dear colleagues, thank you for this opportunity to participate. I've been listening to all of you with high attention. I understand that the fate of NGO in education differs seriously from others because such things have been quite scrutinized better in education. We do not recall anymore how we should deal with NGO in preschool and school education. We have switched to per capita financing and budgeting. A good example of the need for NGO to be supplied in these areas when the government set the objective of ensuring access to preschool education and to provide places at schools for all the children of the schooling age. And of course, the government will not be able to cope with this issue, all of them. And now family kindergartens are being set up, individual entrepreneurs involved. I would say just the law about education had codified all of it 4 or 5 years ago, while the sanitary norms about kindergartens we received only as recent as 1 year ago. So when we discuss legal framework development, we should necessarily include in it the respective principles federally, and also specify the requirements in a specialized area where we would like to promote it. The government is drawing more frequently the private sector. The NGO set up various major projects. I represent here today the central headquarters of the All Russia Public Front, led by Vladimir Putin, who set the objective to us not only to have control over and make proposals, but also to begin a real impact on the well-being of our people. So one of the projects we are implementing right now. Yeah, it's underway. Galina said we are doing all of it to provide access to quality services. We focused also on additional education. We developed various arrangements for that. The Ministry of Education supported us proactively. We are quite grateful for our synergy with the Ministry of Finance, because this year's budget has a separate item is now on additional education. It allows us for more review, and it's for the second year that the Ministry of Education has been testing personal certificate inclusion into the additional education. Last year there were 7 regions. Now this year we have 9 regions. We also participate intensively. We provide support to the public, to the community. Even as recent, even now, as early as now, the additional education covers more than 3% educational establishments, mostly in major cities for now. If we think over what parents would like to take on in additional education, they do not choose now an organization or a school, but rather the coach, the trainer, and also, well, because in small size NGOs or private education institutions, the air is better. Also considering the disabled, it's important to establish in public education. For many parents, it's not only the license that matters that much, but they select the organizations that provide not educational services, but those who provide the developing leisure. We understand that when attending such classes, our children develop intensively as well. The All Russia People's Front does not just organize discussions on various fora and conferences. We also tackle practically many issues. It's important to us how parents support the introduction of personal certificate in additional education. I can say that our results have been confirmed by surveys and polls. We have held the polls in the regions where this certificate is being introduced. 80% of the parents believe that such certificate for personified financing allows to get additional education for their children. Whether the situation will change when the certificate is introduced, we believe yes. Even now, when the parents who receive it, they say that have seen for the first time that the government invests really, indeed, into their child's development. They have now the right of choice, not just enroll their children into the interest group where the leader may dictate. There are also some NGOs who practice it for free. And I also trust that additional financing, extra support will help improve the relevant ambience for their children and promote the programs. Hopefully, budgetary financing and access to it for the NGOs is not only a method to improve the current NGO's situation, but also more NGOs will crop up, and hopefully the individual entrepreneurs will also leave the shadow market, and their services will be more accessible for our people. Furthermore, that almost 70% of the parents expect primarily from additional education maximum promotion of their child's faculties and capabilities, intellectual and physical, including. We surveyed the parents how they evaluate the current context. While the qualifications of teachers evaluate at 4.3 points out of 5 in total. The variety of the programs is 6.3 scores, with 2.3 for the equipment and facility supplies. We believe, and we see it in the regions where testing is underway. This mechanism has already resulted in new educational programming. The relevance do not invest their certificate in the educational establishments where the conditions are not so attractive for their children. Lev Jakobson has said that one of the risks is the aspiration of the system to preserve itself and not let in newcomers. So we surveyed the faculty in the system, and they said, more than 20% said that there is an opportunity to improve the facilities and equipment supplies. There is more choice, wider choice for children, and if they obtain the certificates, they'll be able to attract more children into their education institutions. If we take a look at their personal financing or personal financing services provision in education, it certainly fosters competition and improves educational program quality. And I would say that the current context in education is particular. The NGOs have never been concerned about various standards professional upgrade. And when I opened up my institution in 1992, and I was one of the pioneers in a private school development in Russia. So we prefer quality services improvement, and of course the quality of our faculty and services higher than in a public school. Therefore, we teach, we certify, we participate in all the independent evaluations, we continue to compete in a worthy way. Thank you. Thank you, Lebov. Well, it's an impressive presentation regarding that the other industries, other sectors' experience we have gained. Well, by way of nature, if monies follow humans, it's easier to provide social services, social welfare, and such opportunity in such a scheme financing has not been available so far, and hopefully our public budget will be filled with more funds, and then in social welfare we'll be able to borrow the educational experience. We have one more presentation by Alexey Lavrov, an expert. I think you may have heard how many proposals have been made, how you evaluate what should be done. We need to provide support, to improve financial support for the NGOs, and will surely secure some breakthrough, if a minor, but at least one. During this discussion, I was a bit concerned about saying that the NGOs are some particular creations that operate in the niches where there is no government at all. And the government would not ever like to be there to close the needs of the society. If we use this approach to NGO promotion, then nothing should be done, because we have the grants, how much the federal government, federal, regional, or municipal government can provide. Such grants can be given in advance, and no requirements are laid to any standards or the staff. But of course, grants should be promoted, because the NGO sector should progress, look for new requirements of people, the needs. But it's not the point. We rather mean how to involve NGOs in provision of the services the government must provide, is supposed and is providing. While here, however, we look at the contraindications to the NGOs, like some restriction. I think we cannot avoid necessitating that the personnel has proper qualifications, the license to be obtained. There is no some clear contradiction or some niche related or some absolutely innovative approaches using grants, but such systemized involvement certainly requires compliance with some standards. And at this angle, how should we operate in this area? Well, Olga said there are some federal restrictions, some lists of services. There is also the All Russia list that ensues from the federal legislation. These services should be provided certainly nationally. And in this particular name and understanding. At the same time, the legislation stipulates that every region shapes the regional list of such services on its own, including whatever it likes. If some services are not required, or probably they are not federally provided for, they should appear regionally. The second step we have not made. We have heard already the idea of the federal, regional, and municipal order as if it does exist. But legally, unfortunately, there is no such notion or term. We still don't know what the scope of free public or municipal services in education must be provided by the region or whoever. You will not find this clause in any legislation. And the bill, which is being drafted by the Ministry of Finance and has been discussed by various experts, The primary objective of it is that for the first time ever in our experience, this notion should be formalized, described. As soon as it's done, everything will take its proper place, whether we are adequately financed for that. What techniques should be used to fulfill this public order? Maybe traditionally through public assignments, or alternatively, or a joint competition involving both public institutions and private agencies. I can say that this competition may not be organized right now. Well, you may organize it between NGOs, also on competitive basis, the allocation of public assignments, orders. Only one thing is done by the educational system. I would not mention even such competition-related notions. Everybody can be included in there, but strictly speaking, involving into providing public services, the private sector to provide public services is impossible. But the first time we suggest that the allocation of the public funds should be set up, that both NGOs and other institutions or additional education establishment should compete on a parity basis for such funding. Of course, Federal Law 44 scares off everybody, but it should be determined by the respective executive agency while providing for all the admittance conditions, and it will certainly help use a part of the public funds in the private sector. And also, we need to formalize such requirements to the educational certificates. Well, any such a uniform notion of what such requirement should be, what responsibility of the service provider should be, what the consumer has received, the proper quality, all this has not been regulated completely. As soon as we've settled it legally and put out this uncertainty how to apply these tools, all the obstacles will go to the purely legal practice. Indeed, there is such an obstacle of underfunding. When we hear that why less legal requirements we have to the private sector, it should not be the case, of course. And the bill states that these requirements should be equal, but there are the loops, the bypasses with regard to that. But it depends on the regional preparedness or municipal preparedness to implement what's defined by the respective laws and bylaws. Well, to draw the bottom line, not of this discussion, of course, but what we have just said, I would say we should not say that we have such strict financial restrictions. The Ministry of Finance does not have objectives to limit public funding. If we had such a task, the Ministry of Finance would not have set new standards and rates and just everybody to stay on a cost estimate. And the best way, of course, to save costs. But public costs in education will certainly grow for social welfare as well. But all these funds should be used efficiently. But it can be done only when the government who order the services should be separated from the service providers. We may not, in an ongoing conflict of interest, how to save budgetary expenditures and how to provide quality services. Therefore, this process goes step by step. First, the public assignment should be changed. Everybody is used to public assignments. We didn't have any subsidy in the past, while the next step should be to provide in areas where it's possible new tools to involve both NGOs and the public sector to provide such services. Thank you, Alexei. Dear colleagues, because we are so pressed for the time flows so fast. I don't know how to evaluate the past presentations. It's not the first time. Probably for more than 2 decades, we have discussed. But we have discussed only for the last 2 years such in-depth, important issues as determinants and what risks we have in NGO performance. what obstacles we have and what should be regulated. All of it can be described, and the whole action plan can be set up. I would like to give an opportunity to speak, well, to all of you, if any one of you would like to speak up. But remember that we are pressed for time. But please tell us if we support. How do you think? If we support what Alexei has said, to do our best to accelerate, first of all, the submittal of the bill on government, municipal and social order for public and municipal services in the social sector to the State Duma. It's very important because if we resolve this issue and regulate this issue, this is 50% of all the obstacles in the way of the NGOs. Will we support it? Yes? Yeah, I would like to say something. Please introduce yourself and use the microphone, please. At least, we should have this project on hand. Yes, and this bill. How many people here have seen this bill? Yeah, it's changing very fast. Yeah, fortunately, I have seen the last version of this bill. In my view, it's also still rough. It's crisscrossed with the men's. But what's your idea? What's your idea about regulation in this area? Firstly, I disagree with Alexei. It is possible today to create a comprehensive mechanism to draw the institutions, private organizations, not-for-profit organizations, into competitions without any certificate or with whatever. All of it can be done right now. We have quite an established legislation. This bill tackles other issues, but it's a long story. We don't have any text, so supporting anything, I can say this bill is changing every month. What should we support? I'm against that. Thank you. Well, thank you for your viewpoint. I think you are absolutely right. Just a second. The bills, this particular bill is on the website. It's been discussing for long. Yeah, we discussed it intensively at the second forum of social innovations. But given your opinion, you are right, absolutely. I think it's not only you who shares this endpoint, in particular those who have not read this bill. It is possible right now to read it. We do not vote right now whether adopt this bill or not. We support rather the idea that this subject matter needs regulation. There will be many debates in the future. There will be parliamentary hearings, both at the Council of Federation and in the State Duma. It should be such as to facilitate but not hinder this process. So let us also agree on this approach. But most importantly, let's not be indifferent. It's for the second time that we discuss the obstacles, and we progress rather slowly, where the regions have already said that regulation is required. So we've closed the subject. Well, Galina, I would say, I'd like to inform our colleagues that the State Duma and the Committee on Science and Education, the Expert Council, have considered 3 times this bill. We are working quite intensively on the wording together with the Finance Ministry, and we have considered in the expert community also in the public People's Front, and every iteration of this project specifies further the issues arisen. But still, there are probably still many issues that need a completion. Yeah, we need to see how all other sectors will impact on it. But the matters of principle have been, I think, already well streamlined. Well, anything, yeah, from the audience. Be brief, please. Be brief, please. I would say. Well, we work on the roadmap. It's a matter of principle about the particulars, how NGO perform. And the point is not that it's the government orders such services. There is no contradiction if you understand that the grants vary, not that they finance something particular, but by their format, the timeline, and that they're not adapted to ongoing financing of the service provision. That's what Alexei said. I believe it's very important that when making the lists of the services required, what the government is doing and calls upon the NGOs, this innovative practice was taken account of. We've been encountered, not that something new, but that the public sector, well, in the public sector, the speed of obsolescence, the rate of obsolescence is very high. Does it make sense to draw NGOs who have made only 4 steps forward and then to squeeze out in the framework which is obsolete? And unfortunately, there are still problems in the public sector. And secondly, there are technicalities apart from what have been designated that need, I believe, for the Ministry of Finance and generally financially to summarize the best practices and to replicate those to the regions. And also budgetary planning. Most regions cannot understand how to invest in the compensations after services have been provided. They cannot predict how many NGOs and entrepreneurs will come for compensation. And also, well, please, and also the payments of such compensation subsidy also a problem. They say, well, you are part of the list now, or shortly, but we don't have funds. We don't know how to finance, how to make payments to you. It's not an ideal picture with a physical allocation of the funds earned. Thank you. It's very important. In particular, your last idea, when nothing has been said about that. The NGOs, they have raised this issue repeatedly. But as for the best practices and innovations, we had introduced this format, as Valentina Matvienko suggested, the form of social innovations in the regions involving necessarily the NGOs. Well, as for the paths we needed to asphalt later, if the NGOs do not pass over, they will lose the most valuable things for which sometimes they are set up for. They are founded mostly to tackle the issue that has not been resolved by the government using traditional techniques. You are quite right. Let's wrap up. Introduce yourself. You'll be the last one. Please be quick. I represent the Southern Federal University. But as an expert, as a person who was involved also in drafting the 83rd bill, federal bill, well, I'm glad that we have such hot debates at this side, because all the sequence of the steps aims the emergence of this bill. On the other hand, we need to agree some details all the time, and we are proactive in that. We cannot help noticing that the public sector, the private sector is emerging as an integral to our life, and we need the interface there. Of course, as the universities, we suffer that there will be competition and part of the public assignments will be taken away. But now, in trying to reconcile our expenditures, we look up our communication. We also invite you to take a look at the tariffs. It's all expensive indeed for us as well. We need to make cost estimates to implement the programs. We suffer indeed how the NGOs will perform. But when at the high schools of economics, well, when people come for inclusive programs, the public sector, the private sector resolve those issues quite well. They're ready to use small groups for learning. Lev Jakobson said we need the balance of interests. We are concerned about that. Let's look at the outcomes of NGO performance in such services provision. It's important. The quality of that comes today should match, should be respective. We see what the problems we had in higher schools, but the public sector also suffered in that. Not only the private sector. We have done a lot to improve the quality of the services. Let us try to provide adequate access to the private sector that is now snowballing. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina Alexandrovna. And, we have 1 minute and we'll wrap up. We were asked to come on time to a plenary session, so here we go. Thank you. Introduce yourself and trade union education. Vladimir Vadim. So I need to fully support Boris Volovich. It is very difficult law and complicated, and saying it's not ready for adopting. Well, we have agreed already. Even if this text was circulated, and I repeat, it's complicated law that need to be studied, and unfortunately, Ministry of Finance stopped discussion of this law last year. A special group was created where Boris and myself are members. Right, and here we need to discuss not only on the level of slogans, but wording, text, and this I spoke was right. And the experts need to continue and discussion. And then we say whether we bring it up, submit it or not. Now we can fix only one. Yeah, regulation in the system of non-governmental services is required, definitely. But how it will be regulated, in which industry, and it's not possible whatever Ministry of Finance is offering this under one level, and it is successful and it's ongoing and it's not suitable for general education, and we discuss it. And we need to find some compromise trade-offs, and we need to discuss it, but it's not existing, so we'd like to have it. Thank you, Vladimir Borisovich. Dear colleagues, we're going to wrap up, if you don't object. And first, on your behalf, I'd like to thank all the experts, and each of them want to name them again. Thanks for participating in this panel, and thanks for speakers and those speaking from the audience and those who took part. And it seems to me conversation was very productive and in a different essential format than earlier discussions regarding draft legislation that brought these discussions. And I think we need to agree and we need to continue work on the text of this law and agreement procedure, wide discussion, and only after that, in order to reach for the government to start considering it. So far it is just development and the Ministry of Finance. And in this sense, I would like to move this draft law and continue working on this text. I need to convince that there are some aspects, and I think it's difficult to reach unified opinion, especially on financial support. And it's always complicated draft legislation. It's not easy to describe financial mechanism, but need to make it the way to be understandable not only for specialists, but representatives of NGOs and budget people, and understand for those involved in this area. So, esteemed colleagues, I will not mention everything that we discussed and agreed upon, but we promise you that all proposals mentioned here will be worked out and grouped together. I will continue work in this regard. And we have not stopped it, actually, but we see it is a complicated process that needs to be worked in the State Duma and the Federation Council and trade unions and NGOs, and all of us need to work on this and without stopping. And in this regard, we'll make this summary along our discussion panel. So thanks to all and for your help. Organization was excellent, was comfortable to work. Thank you, and thanks to the moderator.